What's up, party people, and welcome back to another edition of Shots to the Dome. Today's episode is going to be another solo cast, so it's just me on the show today. And I was fortunate enough to make a presentation during the South by Southwest Festival here in Austin, Texas recently to the company Ampersand, run by my friend Catherine Hahn, or Catherine Applebaum now, because she is married. Shout out to Kat and the amazing team at Ampersand. And I've had so much positive feedback from that presentation that I thought it would be great to do a podcast episode on it. You will remember this topic from a previous episode that I did with my friend Chris Page. He hit us with the state story strategy model that he got from Tony Robbins. So if you want to hear the genesis for this episode, head over to the episode that I did with Chris Page. But just to give a brief synopsis here, because the reason why I want to do this on the podcast is I think it's going to be powerful for all of us to help us stay motivated, help us stay inspired throughout our day to make even more of an impact. If you're listening and you're a coach, if you're a teacher, if you're in healthcare, you can make an immediate impact on your clients and patients, right? But that doesn't mean that you can't. If you work in a traditional office, you have a traditional 9 to 5, you can still make a huge difference in the lives of others. And keeping yourself motivated and inspired is a huge way to do that. But how do we do that? Because how many of us, show of hands, me included, have had those mornings, those moments, those days where you wake up and you're like, man, I'm just not feeling it today. Or, oh man, today's going to be a horrible day. And then how does that influence the rest of our day, right? All of a sudden we go get our coffee and Starbucks or your favorite coffee shop gets your coffee order wrong. And you're like, well, this is what I thought was going to happen. I'm having a horrible day, right? You hit a red light on your way to the gym or on your way to work. And you're like, oh, of course I was going to get delayed. This is what I had told myself this morning. That's horrible, right? And that state that you wake up in or decide to put yourself in the morning sort of leads and bleeds into the rest of the day, versus if you wake up and you're like, man, today's going to be an amazing day. And then you get the wrong order of coffee and you're like, that's cool. Like, I'll just get another one. Or I've been meaning to try this. You hit a red light on your way to the gym or work and you're like, oh, this is fine. Like, I'll just take a moment, maybe check my phone real quick. My point being, it would be amazing if we could put ourselves in the latter state that I just described more often than not, but we really don't have strategies to do that, right? And if I'm on my soapbox, obviously wish they would have taught this to us in school. I think the state story strategy model really answers this question and solves this riddle. And my friend Chris Page actually got this from an online event that he attended with Tony Robbins. So I want to give credit where credit is due. However, outside of what Chris had mentioned in the podcast, I had not heard anything else about the state story strategy model. And I sort of added to that with what you're going to hear today and what I presented during the South by Southwest conference with my friend Kat and her team at Ampersand. And that's the one that I'm going to share with you today. So typically in life, we start with the strategy. Even thinking back to high school or college, when you're working on a project, you start with, okay, what's the strategy going to be? If you run your own business, if you work for a large corporation, you probably have to come up with strategy to achieve certain goals. Much of the time, that strategy can be very challenging. It can be daunting, right? And that challenge can sometimes impact the story that we tell ourselves. My point being, if the strategy is challenging, all of a sudden the story is, man, I don't know if I'm going to be able to get this, right? Because all of a sudden our mind starts going into that negativity bias that we've talked about on the show before. And all of a sudden our minds maybe think a little bit more negative, a little bit more down. And all of a sudden the story that we're creating around this strategy isn't the best. On a scale of 1 to 10, it's maybe like a 3 or a 4, right? And then that story impacts and informs the state that we find ourselves in. So if we're having a hard time with the strategy, we're having a hard time solving a problem or an issue or a challenge, all of a sudden that informs the story that we tell ourselves, which is, oh my God, this strategy, this is so hard. I don't know if I'm gonna be able to do this. And then that impacts the state that we find ourselves in, because all of a sudden we feel down, right? Because we haven't been able to solve this riddle or whatever it is that we're working on. That's the strategy story state model. So what Tony Robbins recommended, and this is what Chris enlightened me to on our podcast, was to do a 180 on that, basically switch it around. And you go into a state story strategy model. What that means is if we're on that 1 to 10 scale for a state, we want to try to get as close to a 10 to 10 state every day as we can, right? Even, 7, 8, 9, somewhere on that upper sort of quartile, if you will, because that's when we can get the best work done. So if we can create a state, if we can ensure that we get to a 10 to 10 state, 10 out of 10 state or close to it, all of a sudden that's going to inform the story that we tell ourselves, right? If we feel amazing, like the analogy I used previously of waking up on the right side of the bed, all of a sudden the story we tell ourselves is going to be greatly impacted by that. And then guess what? The strategy at that point doesn't really matter, because we're going to be so positive about what we're doing, regardless of if we hit a roadblock or a speed bump, we're probably going to be able to get through it because we ourselves are in a 10 out of 10 state. We're feeling more positive about what's going on, right? And so again, using that analogy of waking up on the right side of the bed and thinking it's going to be an amazing day, remember how those obstacles of the coffee and hitting the red light, all of a sudden, you're fine with it. You're more positive about the experience that you're having on this planet. So that's the state story strategy model. We try to get ourselves into a 10 out of 10 state. That informs the story that we tell ourselves, which is now going to be way more positive. And that story is going to impact the strategy, because at that point, no matter the problem, no matter the challenge, no matter the issue that we need to solve, we're going to approach it in a 10 out of 10 state. We're going to approach it in a very positive mood, and we're probably going to be able to solve it. And so then the question becomes, how do we consistently get into a state, a 10 out of 10 state that can serve this model and help us basically never wake up on the wrong side of the bed again? And so this is what I'm going to get into now. And if you are listening at home, you have some time, definitely take some notes on this one, because there are going to be actionable steps that you can use in your life to get up into a 10 out of 10 state as quickly and as efficiently as possible, right? Because even if it takes us a little bit of time to get into that 10 out of 10 state, it's how much can we do that during the week? Can we be consistent with it? And let's say in a normal work week, you have 3 days that are super great and positive and 2 days that are kind of down. Can we get you to 4 days? Can we get you to 5 days? That's the thinking behind this. Okay, so if we're taking notes at home, this is the first part that I really want you to keep in mind. The first step to maintaining a 10 out of 10 state is to create a morning routine that works for you. If you've been listening to Shots to the Dome, you know I am an avid meditator. That is one of my favorite aspects of a morning routine. But you've probably heard of people who do yoga, they do breath work, they go for morning walks, they maybe do a cold plunge, they do a sauna, they do all kinds of things, right? It's not that you have to do all of them. They journal, you can add that one to the mix. It's not that they do all of them at once and it's a 2 to 3 hour morning routine. I'm not saying to do that. What I am recommending is to pick a couple to try out those different morning routine modalities and see what resonates with you. If you have a history of being a creative writer, you like writing, journaling is probably going to work for you. Highly recommend getting out in nature, going on a morning walk to start your day. That's one that I think everyone can implement. There is a lot of science to support that. Basically, when we are sleeping, our cortisol is really low. And then when we wake up, all of a sudden the cortisol spikes, right? Because our brains are like, oh my God, I'm awake. What's going on, right? And so to help lower that cortisol before we get into a work day or whatever we're doing for that day, which can again increase cortisol, we want to let that cortisol come back down. And morning walks are a great way to do that. Also, studies show that spending as little as 10 minutes in nature leads to an increase of dopamine, serotonin, those feel-good chemicals, just being out in nature, because we are animals on this planet, right? And so we can use that scientific research, use that knowledge to basically hack, quote unquote, our mornings to feel even better. And so that one, the morning walk, getting out in nature, that one's, I think, something that everybody can do. It takes maybe like 5 to 10 minutes, right? Especially if we want to lean into that science that I just mentioned previously. If you have thought about meditating, try that out. There's a book called The Tools of Titans by Tim Ferriss, and it's basically an aggregation of his podcast. He's had maybe at this point thousands of guests on his podcast, and Tools of Titans, the book that he aggregated all of these episodes in, he noticed that 80% of top performers, titans of industry, meditate. So if we're looking for clues, because success leaves clues, and I'm using air quotes, right? That seems to be a hack that could help increase our state and impact our 10 out of 10 state, help us get there, right? That's honestly why I meditate, because I was listening to a lot of Tim Ferriss a decade ago, read the book and was like, wow, I should probably start meditating. You could try cold plunges if you have that capability, breath work, definitely try that out. I've done some breath work, love it. So my point is, try to create a morning routine that works for you. And supplementation could totally work in this. Supplementation could be part of the conversation. I'm staring at a coffee that I have every morning. Who doesn't love their coffee, right? And that can be a part of getting you to that 10 out of 10 state, having that morning coffee, having that morning cup of joe. I would also recommend, when you have that coffee, take a moment to just be mindful of that first sip, right? Be grateful for that first sip. Because I don't know about you, but there was, I went on a backpacking trip back in January of 2021 off the grid. I'd never been camping before. It was very impactful in my life. And I brought powdered coffee with me in a mug because the person helping me get what I needed at REI suggested it. And he was like, trust me, you won't be disappointed. And that fourth day of drinking powdered coffee, I'm sitting there under a tree and I'm like, I am not taking enough time with the coffee that I make at home or the coffee that I get at my local Starbucks. I'm just chugging that shit. I should probably have some more moments of mindfulness and gratitude around that. So you can co-opt that same mindfulness practice, that same gratitude practice around your cup of coffee. You could also use nootropics. If you follow me on Instagram, you've probably seen me post about Cured Nutrition, which is a partner of our company DLD Nation, and they have an amazing nootropic called Rise. I post about it so much because I use it myself, and I've been a big fan of nootropics for a little over a decade. And honestly, Cured is the best nootropic out there, in my opinion. That's because they use CBD and some active mushrooms in their nootropic that helps limit the jitters and helps limit the crash afterwards. And I've been a big fan of it. Actually, if we go back far enough in the partnership, it was because I reached out to them and said, hey, I love your products. Is there a way we could get a code and work with you? And now I've been blessed to be able to call their founder and CEO, Joseph, a close friend. So definitely check out Rise, the nootropic from Cured, if you're looking for additional supplementation to help boost you to that 10 out of 10 state. You also heard me mention gratitude a moment ago. Highly recommend a gratitude practice as well. That's something that I append to the end of my meditation practice. It can be as easy as saying out loud or in your head what you're grateful for. For instance, I'll say to myself how grateful I am to be married to Dayla, how grateful I am for supportive friends and family, how grateful I am for our puppy Kobe. But I even go further and I say how grateful I am for our dishwasher and our washer dryer, because there have been times in my life, and maybe times in yours too, where that wasn't the case. Shout out to the Coin Laundry gang. I remember those days, and it's really nice to have all these sort of cleaning weapons at our disposal that we didn't have previously. So it's nice to show gratitude for that. And studies show, LOL, that a gratitude practice can make a positive impact on our overall optimism and our overall mindset and positivity in as little as 10 days. So if you want to try gratitude practice out, try it for 10 days straight, see how you feel. So that's using our morning routine to our advantage, right? To help us get into that 10 out of 10 state as consistently as possible. And if you have this morning routine daily, all of a sudden that becomes a huge arrow in your quiver to use to help boost you to that 10 out of 10 state, right? Starting your morning how you want to. If you're listening to this and you're like, Sean, I'm super busy, I can't even think about doing that, just start really simple. I've been working with some life coaching clients recently who have busy schedules, a bunch of teachers, a bunch of people in healthcare who have to be at their jobs super early. Try the coffee gratitude mindfulness moment. Just pour your coffee, have that for a sec, sit there and take a sip and be like, wow, this is great. I'm really grateful for this. Be mindful about it. Do that for 10 days straight. See how you feel. You could even add a little bit of gratitude there. Let me know, hit me up, DM me, and let me know how that works for you. Moving on from how a morning routine can help us continue to get into a 10 out of 10 state, the next tip, the next hack that if you're taking notes, you can write down is to use technology to your advantage. So what I mean by that is, I don't know about y'all, but I have multiple Spotify playlists. Shout out to everybody who is fans of my Fuck It Up EDM workout mix on my Spotify. That's at Sean Unity, SeanYoonity on Spotify if you want to follow some of my playlists. In addition to that workout mix, I also have a Focus No Lyrics playlist that's over 3 hours long, I think almost 4 hours. I also have a playlist that is a little bit more chill with lyrics. I have a bunch of different playlists for different modes that I want to get in life. So for instance, if those who have been following our IVF journey, me and Dayla, you know that we didn't get the greatest news to start things out right after our surgery. And that Monday when we got that news, I was feeling really down, as was Dela. So how do we hype ourselves back up? I ended up just throwing headphones in. I turned on one of those playlists, and 15, 20 minutes later, all of a sudden I'm banging out emails. I'm back to work. I'm back into a more positive state than I found myself previously. How many of us go to the gym and all of a sudden you throw your favorite workout mix on and you forget about what's going on the rest of the day? That's what I'm talking about as far as using technology to your advantage. So if you're on Spotify, if you're on SoundCloud, if you love iTunes, go ahead and create your own playlist, get an amazing album going that you can always use as a lay down win to help hype yourself up and get you motivated into that 10 out of 10 state, or help you bounce back if you wake up and you're feeling a little low, right? The other technology that we can use to our advantage, or another technology, if you will, that we can use to our advantage, is YouTube. I truly believe, we consume more than just what we eat and drink. We consume what we watch, what we listen to, what we read, who we hang out with, right? And so if we want to use that to our advantage, you can go on YouTube and search for motivational and inspirational videos. As you know, I'm a huge Kobe Bryant fan. Thankfully, he has blessed the world with a ton of interviews and a ton of motivational videos. And so I will Google, or YouTube rather, Kobe Bryant motivational video, Kobe Bryant inspirational video. Dela and I are big fans of Mark Cuban. So sometimes I'll do Mark Cuban inspirational video, Mark Cuban motivational video. Pick your favorite celebrity, athlete, artist, business person, and then add motivational, inspirational video at the end of that. There are a ton of 5 to 10 minute videos in that realm, and you can watch those to start your day or midday to just sort of get a pop and get some more energy, because you're consuming all this motivation, all this inspiration. It's going to have a positive impact, and that can help us get to a 10 out of 10 state. Anyone who's doing morning cardio, doing fasted cardio, highly recommend getting on the treadmill, throwing on some inspirational, motivational videos from YouTube, and watch how quickly the cardio flies by and how positive you're going to be about getting into your day. And that's another tactic of using technology for us and to our advantage to help boost us into that 10 out of 10 state. And remember, that state informs the story that we tell ourselves, and that helps us with any strategy that we're trying to use in our daily lives, right? Another piece of technology that you can use is your schedules. I don't know about you, but my calendar runs my life. But sidebar, I run my calendar. But if something is in my calendar, it tends to get done, right? I don't know about y'all, but it looks like a clown threw up on my calendar. I have so much going on there, but everything that's on there gets done. So if you want to include a moment of morning meditation or morning routine, schedule it, because then it's probably going to get done, right? If you need a little bit of a boost during midday, you can write, hey, watch a motivational YouTube, or you could even link it in your calendar, and then it's super easy for you to find, right? Or even creating a playlist, putting it as a daily reminder, like, hey, throw on this playlist, right? That can help us get into a habit, because sometimes habits are really hard to form if we don't have any sort of reminder to do so. And so that's where you can use your schedules and online calendars to your advantage. Use technology to your advantage to help you get into that 10 out of 10 state as consistently as possible. Using your schedules to your advantage, and this is the next tip if you want to keep notes at home, using your schedule to your advantage, actually schedule self-care ongoing. This is a big one. And I'm not saying to, like, this may be different things to different people. I'm not saying to schedule a week-long vacation every week, right? If you can and you have the capability and that sounds great to you, do it, right? More power to you. But I'm more talking about how can we integrate self-care activities ongoing to alleviate ongoing pressure on ourselves. Because everybody listening, you have dreams, you have goals, you are trying to achieve great things in your life, right? And it would be a little bit easier if we could pull some of that stress off ourselves, if we could limit burnout, if we could limit mental breakdowns, if we could limit those times that we're crying in the closet, your boy included. How we do that is integrating some self-care ongoing. Yes, the morning routine can be a bit of self-care, but for instance, if you're an online coach and you're working 24/7, highly recommend that you take a half day off at least, right? Half day or a whole day off. I promise you, by having a little bit of that relief in there, you're going to notice a positive return overall, and you're going to notice that you're more consistent and you have more endurance with what you're doing. Because if you are an entrepreneur or you work for somebody else, the goal isn't to do this for the next year or 2 years or 5 years. It's to do this as long as possible. And we know that stress can be the quote unquote silent killer. And so we want to take care of ourselves as best that we can. And so what does that look like? To me, it's integrating activities that really help you bounce back, that are stress relievers, that fill your cup. I don't know if this is just symptomatic of growing up in Los Angeles, but I love watching movies and TV. Very grateful that I met Dayla, who is also really big into watching movies and TV, and that's a huge stress reliever for us. Are we watching television and movies every day for hours? No, but at the end of a long day, we'll watch a couple hours of our favorite show or the new movie that's out. Obviously, I'm typically trying to get Dayla to watch comic book movies, superhero movies. That's awesome, right? And all of a sudden we feel great. We've had some time to zone out and relax. When I'm working with life coaching clients, so often they feel guilty for watching TV and movies as stress reliever. And I'm like, why? Doesn't it hype you up? Makes you feel better? Yeah. And they're not being a couch potato. So like, what's the problem, right? If that hypes you up, schedule some time to do that, to make sure that it happens. You could schedule some time to go on a hike or just kind of go walking around your neighborhood, taking time away from work, right? Because we all need that time to alleviate pressure and alleviate stress. This could also be 3-day weekends. It could be fun trips with your partner, trips with your friends, things of that nature. But having those things scheduled can help us when we get stressed out or down or low in the moment. Because we've all had those periods of time where it's a Wednesday and you're super stressed and you've got a lot on your plate. Maybe you have a project for work and it's like, oh my God, I feel the burnout approaching. I feel the mental breakdown approaching, and I don't have any time off for 3 weeks. That's tough, right? The converse of that is if we've already integrated our self-care ongoing, that same analogy of almost hitting a wall on a Wednesday, now you can look ahead and say, oh, well, I have something planned on Saturday. I'm taking a half day Saturday, or I'm taking Sunday completely off. I have that in the chamber. I'm going to be okay. I can push a little bit longer and then take that time off. You've probably heard the saying, they blew a gasket, or he or she blew a gasket when they get pissed. That saying is from an analogy of a machine that runs on steam that literally needs sort of gaskets to relieve pressure. Otherwise, it's going to blow a nut. It's going to blow a bolt, right? If you think back to like the Industrial Revolution, me, the history major, LOL. But that's where that saying comes from. And so what I'm trying to get at by using and sharing this analogy is to create ways to alleviate pressure so you don't blow a gasket. That said, me trying to shift the perspective on burnout and mental breakdowns, they can be a positive. When you've had those in your life, you've probably decided to change something when you had them, right? It's a reminder that so often we have failures in life, we make mistakes, we have down periods of time, but then that helps inform how we want to not make that happen again, not let that happen again, and bring ourselves back up. So if you do find yourself in burnout, if you do find yourself in mental breakdowns, don't beat yourself up, don't add insult to injury, right? Just remember that those moments can help us get back into a better state. It can help us better strategize for our lives moving forward. One last analogy I want to hit you with as far as self-care that I share with so many clients, so many people, I get on my soapbox about this, is to think of your work life as you in a canoe that is somewhat underwater because it has holes in it. So you're in this canoe, that's what you do for work, and the holes are whatever it is that you do a lot. So it could be emails, it could be meetings with clients, it could be meeting with patients, it could be things that you have to do over that day, right? That's what those holes in the canoe represent. And when you wake up in the morning, you're damn near underwater in the canoe, right? Because you've slept through the night, all of a sudden you get more emails, you got more to-dos, maybe you have a long list of clients that you have to meet with that day. And so you are bailing water out of the proverbial canoe, right? And you do that all day. You're answering emails all day, you're meeting with clients all day, et cetera. And then at night, you get your proverbial canoe to the point where there's a little bit of water in it and there's not enough to where you can't go to sleep, right? And you can't check out for the rest of the day. And then when you wake up in the morning, you're underwater again and you got to bail the water out and rinse and repeat, it starts over. If we take that as a fact that the canoe, your business life, your work life is always going to have those leaks in it and it's always going to be a little underwater, and you're always going to have to bail out the water day in and day out, then the conversation becomes more about how can I maintain the state? How can I maintain the energy? How can I maintain the person that's bailing the water out, right? That becomes the conversation. Because if you're going to have to bail the water out of this canoe every single fucking day, you're going to have to be consistent with it. And so how we're consistent with it is taking care of ourselves. So that's why I share this analogy. Coming back to it is we want to make sure that we take care of that person bailing out the water. And how we do that is integrating self-care ongoing. And yes, this could also be mani-pedis. I'm a big fan of pedicures. Take a coffee, zone out for a little bit. It could be a salon day. It could be a spa day. You know, that's how I want you to think about integrating self-care. It could be playing music. It could be playing video games. Like, let's not beat up video games. Again, to shout out Tim Ferriss, he has a great quote that if you plan to waste time, if you schedule to waste time, it's not wasting time. So if you love playing video games and you get a lot of joy out of that, you connect with people online playing your favorite game for 2 or 3 hours and you schedule that, awesome, right? The issue is when you wake up, start playing video games and it hits noon and you're like, oh my God, I haven't done anything I need to get done today. Like, I shouldn't have been playing video games. That's where it becomes a problem. But otherwise, it can be a great stress reliever. It can be a great modality of escape in our lives. And that's kind of what we want to get to as far as strategies for integrating self-care to help us maintain that 10 out of 10 state. Just to recap, what have we talked about so far? As we look for ways to get into a 10 out of 10 state, let that inform our story, let that inform our strategy. The first one is to create a morning routine that works for you. And we went over a plethora of strategies with which to do so. The second one is to use technology to your advantage. Thank goodness we live in 2022 and we have a ton of options at our disposal to be able to do this. And then the third one is to integrate self-care ongoing and what that looks like to you. I should also mention that with the nootropic rise from Cured Nutrition that I mentioned earlier as part of your morning routine and sometimes using supplementation to help you get into that 10 out of 10 state, if you would like to try those products out, get a discount, you can use the code DLDNation. We will have that linked in the show notes as well. Again, they're an amazing company. I'm shouting them out because I use them and they can really be a big help getting you back into that 10 out of 10 state, in addition to coffee or anything else with which you start your morning. To finish up the episode, I would love to know what your favorite from this list was, and if you start to integrate it in your life, the positives that you see from that. Thank you again for checking in. And as always, if you have a moment, I would love if you at least follow us at Shots to the Dome Podcast on Instagram so you don't miss a new episode every week. We hit our goal last year of 52 episodes, which is 1 episode per week, and we're trying to match that goal this year as well. And it would really be helpful to have you guys never miss an episode. And you can do that by just following at Shots to the Dome Podcast. And then if you have a chance, if any of these episodes, this one included, has impacted you in positive ways, I would love if you left us a 5-star review on iTunes. And if you wanted to add a little bit more in terms of writing out a review, that would be awesome. I really appreciate that. And with that, you can always find me at Fitness Shaman on Instagram. You can follow us at DLD Nation to learn more about our coaching team. And I really appreciate you checking out Shots to the Dome. I know you have a ton of podcasts to listen to, and I appreciate you spending time with me and us. With that, I appreciate you. And this has been another episode of Shots to the Dome.